by virtue of what I do, I get to interact and have a lot of discussions with young professionals about property, life, etc., career choices. And hence we have so many topics. And one of the first questions I got is property still worthwhile investment in South Africa, considering there's so many alerts about interest rates going up, issues around people saying they've been misled by real estate agents, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is basically, is in 2022, for a young Black professional, mind you, this is someone who's a female, she just started working last year, and obviously working under COVID, jobs scarcity is tough. So you having a job, you still have that uncertainty about your income. Well, what would you tell someone like that? Is from your personal view, is property still worthwhile investment for a young person to look at or not? Liz, the floor is yours.
Geez, I was still thinking about this one because it's a conversation I was having with myself with regards to now buying a second property with the immigration levels being what they are at the moment. Do I still want to buy in South Africa, or do I want to save and invest in a different portfolio at the moment? So it's a good question, and one that I haven't quite resolved even within myself.
I appreciate that. I guess it's a very broad dynamic question for one to kind of simply say yes or no, but it's just more so to understand on your personal side, would you think it's someone has to kind of look at it from a particular lens or not? But Pamela, what would you say to the question, Pamela?
Look, I think for me, when you know, everyone wants to be a homeowner, I believe. I think that the core thing about having a property speaks to the ultimate asset, you know, the land situation. A property is land in itself, and it gives you pride. So for me, 2022, certainly, you know, Liz makes a valid point by saying, you know, you need to do an assessment, obviously. You can't just, okay, so if you're speaking to a newly young professional that's just entering the professional space and they want to go into the space and buy property and says, look, Peter, should I buy? For me, it's, you've done the assessment, and once you've done the assessment, I say go for it. I say you're looking at interest rates might be going up, but interest rates won't go up rapidly in you know, and the reality is that, of course, there's guidelines to that, but I think for me, I would say go ahead. Number two, and after making that decision, or before even, it's making sure where you're standing and understanding whether you are now ready for it. But whether you should buy, absolutely. Has it been a buyer's market? Absolutely. So why not? You know, I would say capitalize on that. Of course, taking certain things into consideration. But if a young professional is coming in and the finances are looking good, and we can sit down and look at the rands and cents, and you say, should I buy? Go right ahead. Why not? I mean, this is an asset. There's so many ways how you can keep having that. But the point is, it's a no-brainer for me. If the
Can I add something to what Pamela's actually saying?
Sure.
Property is also historically known to be a good asset. So that's why it's like an assessment, as Pamela is saying. It is historically known to be a good asset to have. So if the question of finances is covered, if question of it as an investment property is covered, and you know you're not going to move around or anything, then yes. But obviously then there's the other factors.
Yeah, very true.
Absolutely.
Yolanda, on your side, do you share the same sentiments? Yolanda? I think she has network issues. I'll probably come back to her, probably give her one more minute. But I guess for the sake of us.
So there's a key difference between being homeowner, so buying a property. Basically, your goal is to make money. How do you make money through property? Either through capital appreciation or through cash flow, right? And if you're approaching the journey of buying property from an investor perspective, then there are key things that you need to look at, right? So for example, you need to make sure that you do your research. You take your time, right? You need to find the right property in the right area at the right price. You need to be able to negotiate. You need to be able to crunch the numbers, you know? What does appreciation look like in a couple of years? What does my cash flow look like from a monthly basis? So I think for me, the biggest thing is it a property market? Is it a buying market? Well, it depends, you know? You need to do your research. And if you can find those gems that will make you money, then you can call it a property investment.
Good point, good point. I think we had lost you a bit earlier, but I guess we had found the rest of your message. So I was happy this network came back. But yeah, that's a very good point, especially if you understand, is it a buyer's market, a seller's market? And as to the point earlier, there's also a sentimental value of owning a property beyond just, you know, you want to make money out of it. Hence, it's either investment property or it's just for the sake of, you know, let's say you want to have a home to live in, and etc. But I think now to move to a point of where, like I mentioned, you're a young professional. Now you're looking, or you just saw an ad on Property 24, and the question is, you see whether I should rent. You see this nice house that you see, wow, it's an amazing house, 2-bedroom. You can have a nice party, bring all your friends over and have a girls' night there. The question now becomes, from that stage, what are the things that you should look at from terms of, one, a cost perspective? So for example, in fact, let me not even start there. Let me say, for example, what is the first step one should look at? And once you've now seen a property you like, is it a case where you contact the real estate agent, and what is the kind of things that you have to be made aware of from that? So basically just the question is more so, what are the steps to take from, you see a property you like, what is the next step you would consider one has to be aware of going forward? Liz?
Are you speaking in terms of renting, or are you speaking in terms of buying?
Buying. So let's say you want to buy a property.
So, okay, so you like a property on Property 24. What are the steps that, well, you know, even on my property channel, I don't like speaking as an expert in the field. So I'm just going to speak from experience about what I did. Firstly, I worked out my budget. From the get-go, I knew what I would spend or be willing to spend on a property, because then that influenced the bracket that I put in Property 24. So say, for example, that has happened and the bracket, the apartment that I like or the house that I like is now on Property 24, and it is within the bracket of the houses that I then afford. I contact the real estate agent to view. The other thing that I did was run comms on the property, the area. So for example, I stay in a complex called Manhattan Mews. I went onto an app. I went Manhattan Mews, and how much have these properties, apartments specifically, because that's what I'm more interested in, how much are they selling for? So that when I get to the viewing of this place, I know that block B2 sold for 700,000. This is the same size apartment, so 700,000 is where I would go. If the seller was asking for more, then I knew that I could negotiate for less because of the comms. So that's what I do. I go set an appointment with the agent and then run my comms for that area. And then obviously as you view, you'll be able to pick up things, but that's at a later stage.
Okay. You mentioned the app. Hopefully at least is it a publicly available app, or is this something that's someone can
It is a banking app. Can I say the bank's name?
Sure.
Yes, so on the FNB app, it's called Nav Life, and then you go to Nav Home, and then you enter in the complex or the street name of the place that you are viewing, and then it will show you the comms of how much properties in that complex have sold for over the past couple of years.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Liz. Pamela, I guess there's an extension to that question. What are the steps one should take from now looking at a property like? There's also a question around, obviously, the different parties involved. So there's obviously the real estate agent, there's also potentially the conveyancer, there's also the bank. And I'd like to obviously break down to each of those different parties and exactly how does one approach each. But from your view, what are the steps one should be at least made aware of, especially dealing with each of these three parties or other parties involved from your side?
Okay, so I'll also just like to add on what Liz was saying, on the point of the apps. So I work for a firm called S3E2. We have an app that you can download that has calculators on it, right? I'd start at the point where you are saying, you've seen there's an ad. Obviously, the easy part is to then reach out to the agent, right? From a legal perspective, what I usually tell people is that, I mean, when you've called Agent Peter and he's like, okay, let's go view, right? I always tell clients, take your time, open the cupboards, open the door, check everything, open, like literally look at the tiles, ask about the leaks that may be potentially there, ask about, it's almost because where I'm going with this, Peter, is that there's something we call patent and latent defects. And patent defects are things that you can see, because if you open that cupboard and you see that, oh goodness, there's something wrong here, you already can put in the contract that, look, please, can this be fixed? Should I be interested in the property? Check the windows, check, the taps, check all those things. Take your time when viewing the property. That's where I would say. And when your agent is there, let them hold your hand, because agents are also there to hold your hand. Ask them questions. That's what I would say. And again, I know we hear this everywhere in our social circles, in our work, in areas that we work in, where they say there's no such thing as a stupid question. Ask as many questions as you can. So those are part of the things, because you find that a purchaser has bought now, the transfer has taken place, they find out there's a leak, and the next thing you are sitting with the latent defect, because you can't see it with the naked eye at the time that you're viewing the property. But because you bought in summer, in winter, it wasn't raining, so you won't pick that up. But now that it's summer, the property is transferred into your name, and it's summer and it's raining and your ceiling is getting damaged, and the seller says, well, I didn't know. You see what I mean? And the onus is then on the purchaser to prove that they're selling. You see those dynamics. So I usually say that if you can just take your time, don't get pressured, even because you've got a seller that's obviously telling you that, look, I'm selling, I need this to go, and you got an agent that's also trying to push a deal. Don't get pressured. Let the process go slow. Assess where you are, how you're feeling about it. Think about feng shui. Is the energy right for you? But I mean, when we're talking about the mortar, check, look at it, and ask yourself that if you see a problem, if you see something that you may find that you're concerned about, you'd rather ask. And again, reach out to people like myself, who are specialists in well, I'd like to think that's what I'm working towards. But reach out. You wanna know what how far can you negotiate in terms of the things that you're seeing and the problems that are arising. Now that's more on the mortar side, right? On the more financial side of things, now that you've seen the property and they're probably advertising it for 2.2 mil, right? Let's off the bat. Most people, first-time buyers, most banks, well, all banks actually, have a great initiative of actually giving first-time buyers 100% bond, right? Now, to the layman in the street who hears 100% bond, they think, well, I'm sorted. I'm just going to apply, and they're going to assess my income, and they're going to say, I can afford this. And then you're not thinking about transfer costs, which is where I come in. Because if I'm going to be appointed as a conveyancer to transfer this property from the seller into the purchaser's name, you need to pay me for my services. Now you've got a bond, usually, and this is where we start tapping into the parties. When we're talking about the conveyancer, the seller is the one who appoints the conveyancer. Purchasers must always know that. Just because you are paying doesn't mean that you're the one who appoints the agent. But if you think about it, the seller owns the asset. So if I am getting rid of my asset, if I'm alienating my asset, then it automatically says that I'm gonna decide who's gonna do it. I'm gonna get an attorney I trust, a conveyancer, right? That's the one part. So the conveyancer is already in the picture. Then there's the bank. The bank, if you are bonding as a purchaser, will appoint their own conveyancers that are on their panels to attend to the bond registration. Those are two accounts that you have to pay. Do you understand? So I think for most people, what I would say to just sum it up for them is to say, when you're doing the viewing, trust yourself, ask questions, and analyze, look at the little things. You know, if you do get a bit confused and you've gone home and you're like, I actually want a second viewing, trust yourself. That's okay too. It's a process. You know, you are about to invest one of your biggest assets, your fund and your money and your work and effort into something that you're gonna have for the rest of your life, you know, until and ever you alienate it or not. And then secondly, be aware of the finances, you know, transfer costs. There's a scale like those calculators that is released by the Legal Practice Council. The Deeds Office works hand in hand with that. That tells you in which, if you're buying in a bracket of 2 million, then that's what the transfer cost is going to be. You know, so those are the dynamics. So the parties that will be here would be the purchaser, would be the seller, would be conveyancer, would be the bank. So you do get a bit overwhelmed. Another party that people don't know is the bond originator. Okay, so a bond originator is the one that will assist you to kind of look at the best deals out there. Banks have also that. So look at your bank as well.
Thanks, Beth. And mind you, this is a very open, dynamic conversation, so feel free to chip in if you want to extend what you said. But Yolanda, I guess you've heard the discussion
Yes.
about the different parties that are involved. What's your view so far upon how does one navigate those different parties involved? And I think also just to extend to that, maybe you can also answer to the point of, you mentioned something about emergency funds, savings, and et cetera. And there's always been this rule of thumb people read online, you know, you have to put 30% of your income as a consideration for as a bond payment. What are the kind of guidelines you think of from a financial point of view should one, you know, for saving wise, or for how much should one look at in terms of the budget towards a property?
Yeah. So I don't want to repeat what everyone has said, but in terms of the journey of purchasing property, I think there's one important thing I want to point out, and that is making sure you buy the property at the right price, right? So most people will go on Property 24, you see a property for 1 million. Chances are the true valuation of that property is actually not 1 million, right? And then people will just jumpstart the process and put in an offer for 1 million. Guys, please don't do that, right? So what are some of the resources you can use to actually get the true valuation of the property? There's a Lightstone report that you can use online. You can also reach out to your personal banker to assist you. And chances are the true valuation of the property is probably like 20 to 30% lower than the price that you see on Property 24. Right? And what that does is, so I'm a fan of negotiate everything. Okay, I negotiate everything, not from a financial, even with my partner, even with my family, I negotiate everything in my life, right? So what that does is it gives you a good standpoint. You know where the base is for you to start negotiating. Guys, never put in an offer at the price that you see on private property or Property 24. I think that's like my biggest advice. Now, to just speak in general about, you know, finances, savings, and I feel very passionate about this one as well. I think most people, I think as a young working professional, definitely when you start working, there is pressure to just buy property for the sake of having your name on the title deed and just being a property owner, right? There's definitely the personal element to it, you know, it feels good. But there's also the status part of it. You know, you're buying a property because you want everyone to see that you know you're a property owner. And I think it's really important that before you even consider buying the property, to make sure that your personal finances are in check. Now, I know personal finances are personal. They're personal to you, they're personal to me, you know, but there's certain steps that we can all take to make sure that our personal finances are ready before we even embark on the journey of purchasing property, right? Number one, you want to make sure you try to get rid of all the bad debts. So if you have any credit cards, if you have any personal loans, you know, try to reduce that as much as you can or get rid of it. right? You want to make sure you have some sort of savings or emergency fund before you even consider purchasing a property. Why? There's so many upfront costs that come with purchasing a property, but also there's monthly costs, right, that come with owning a property versus renting a property out, right? There's maintenance, things that come up that were not planned for. So you need to make sure you have that cushion and you're comfortable with your finances before you even consider purchasing the property, right? Then once you decide, okay, I'm comfortable with my finances, you've done your homework, this is how much I can afford. I would say, rule of thumb, make sure you don't spend more than 30% of your take-home income on the actual bond repayment of your property, just to give you enough money to be able to cater to all the other needs in your life as well. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Boss, I think this conversation is going so well, and I think I'm even getting a WhatsApp just some questions.
Can I even
go ahead.
I'd like, I like what Yolanda's saying, and part of the reality of our country is that we know that the 4 of us might be sitting here, and then we've kind of made it into varsity and all of that, and whatever the case may be, right? The reality is that our history informs us that we have financial issues. You've just been making it. You've just been. I served my articles at the time, and you're getting paid a certain amount, and the responsibilities are just, they're telling you need to have a car, and you're like, whoa, But one of the things that I then did when I then started kind of becoming a professional, I did exactly what Yolanda was talking about. I took care of the bad debt. I told myself, I wrote a list that I'm committing to paying 1,000 Rand or 500 Rand to this date. Until it's done, there's no luxurious spending for me. There's no shopping. I'll just have to survive with what's in the wardrobe. Be stern with yourself, because the truth of the matter is, she's speaking to Yolanda speaking to the reality, because you're going to walk in there and say you're going to apply for a bond, and they're going to assess you, and they're going to say, but hi, Mr. Kekana, what's going on here? You actually think, so people need to be really realistic about that, and try to teach yourself to manage your finances now. You know what I mean? Tell yourself that even if you have a credit card, once it reaches 2,000, you can no longer use it until you've paid it up. And then further to that, the financial intelligence, we don't know how many resources, by merely having a bank account means that bank is serving you. So you can walk in there and be like, can I speak to a financial advisor? Because I'm a client. So it's so many things that she's talking about that resonates with the fact that we may speak of the situation right now, but the preparation and the aftermath is what's going to inform whether you're in a good financial stance to even own property or rent. And like she said, is ownership always the goal? Sure, but sometimes it's not. You're not ready, and if you're not ready, take that money, put it aside. Once you're ready, then you can make an informed decision.
That's a good point. And one of the things I was having one of the conversations I was having in preparation for this episode yesterday, there was a point where amongst another professional lady, she was a friend of mine, they were both suggesting that if, let's say, for example, you want to start a family in the next 2-3 years, and now you're like, but I want to buy a property. Those kind of factors kind of now inform your decision making. It's like, okay, what if even things like location, let's say you want to be close to work, but now if you're stuck in a place that you have a property in Pretoria, but now you have to relocate in 2 years to a job that's in Cape Town, should you now leave to be rented out and so forth? Is that worthwhile, et cetera, et cetera? So there's just so many things to think about. But I think the good point, like you mentioned, both of you, is around the financial aspect, around the financial education that's important. And maybe this is a question I can lead to Liz to answer, because the first question I ever got when I proposed this idea amongst the people I was talking to was about credit. And, some of you guys mentioned credit cards and et cetera. And there was a question as to whether is a credit card even worthwhile to have to build credit. And even then, typically most of us don't have capital. So how important is it to put a deposit down for your property? So Liz, I don't know what's your take on those points.
Okay, so I'm going to maybe make comments. The first one is with regards to financial education. You don't need to have gone to university to get financial education. You don't even need to speak to a financial advisor, although it's best to speak to a financial advisor. But people who have R5 in their bank accounts don't always feel the need or they have pride to go to a financial advisor because they think a financial advisor is going to look at them and their R5 and go, what's going on here? But there's Live Better Academy by Capitec. You don't need to be a Capitec card holder to go into Live Better Academy. It tells you about credit. It tells you about budgeting. It tells you about saving. It tells you about when you are in debt, what are the methods that can help you come out of debt. And within 2 years, if you follow this academy, because it's got courses on it, and you actually apply what you are learning, whether you are a learner, which is anyone in high school, a student, a person that isn't in university but is an adult. If you apply those, your financial knowledge will grow and allow you to then purchase a property if that is your goal. Then to the second part about the credit. So I got, as I say, I speak from my experience and how it has informed me. I got a credit card when I started working, but I always knew that I was always scared of credit. I think I've said this on my channel as well. I've always been scared of taking out loans. When students in university were taking out clothing accounts, I was like, hell no, I'd rather not have clothes or live on hand-me-downs than go take out a credit card. And that's because I've known aunts that have been paying this one clothing account for all their life. And I was like, I don't want that. But I did take out a credit card, and that was to help my credit score, as they say. And it did help my credit score in a way that I took credit the minimum. And I mean, like the bank wanted to give me like 30,000. I took out 1,500. I used 1,500 and I done the monthly installments. And that is all I used that credit card for. It was to help build my credit score. I wasn't living off my credit card. I wasn't using it as an emergency fund, definitely not. I wasn't using my credit card to fund a lifestyle that I could not afford. My aim, because I didn't want it in the first place, was for it to help build my credit score. Is there different ways that I can build my credit score? Sure, yes. But for me, this was the easiest, and it's also one of the easiest to close. I don't know what my third point was.
It's okay. It's okay. I think as we'll go back, we'll just recircle back and probably just reiterate what your third point was. But you did mention about, and I think each person has their own experiences with credit. Personally, I think I was very hesitant to take credit. In fact, I probably still am. It's just obviously I do have an account, but I'm like.
Even now, I'm also quite hesitant. As Yolanda said, even after buying the property, I am so cautious of what I add to my list of debts that if it's not necessary, I don't have it. If I need to close it, I close it. The house one, the property one is the biggest one, and I'm not trying to add any more unless I'm adding another property, of course.
Okay, that's a good point. I mean, I'm someone, I hate bank SMSs. As soon as I